Corporal Jack Miller stared out the viewport of the ship Horizon's Edge as it moved through the darkness of space. The stars looked different out here, at the edge of human territory. Jack wasn't supposed to be important on this mission. He was just security, just a man with a gun making sure the important people stayed safe. "Corporal, report to the bridge," came the voice over the intercom. Jack straightened his uniform and headed toward the front of the ship. The bridge buzzed with activity when Jack arrived. Captain Abby Foster stood at the center, her face tight with worry as she looked at the main screen. "Miller, good. I need you near the ambassador during the meeting," she said without looking at him. "We've got company." Jack looked at the screen and saw it, a ship that didn't look like anything humans had built. It was huge, with a strange shell-like exterior that reflected the distant starlight. "First contact?" Jack asked quietly. "Seems that way," Captain Foster replied. "They're calling themselves the Vesperians." Ambassador Peter Franklin, a thin man with gray hair, looked nervous but excited. "This is historic, the first alien species we've encountered, and they want to talk." Jack nodded but kept his hand close to his weapon. 6 years in the Earth Defense Force had taught him that new things weren't always friendly things. The Vesperian ship sent over a communication, and the bridge screen filled with the image of an alien. It had a hard outer shell, large compound, eyes like an insect and moving parts around its mouth that clicked when it spoke. The ship's computer translated its speech into English. "Human vessel, we request a diplomatic meeting. Send representatives to coordinate." 3 hours later, Jack stood in the meeting room as Ambassador Franklin welcomed the Vesperian delegation. They were even stranger in person, taller than humans with 4 arms and bodies protected by natural armor. Their movements were careful and precise. Jack counted 5 of them, each with small devices attached to their bodies that translated their clicking speech. "We welcome you in peace," Ambassador Franklin said with a smile. "This is a historic day for both our species." The lead Vesperian, who called itself High Commander Zekrel, tilted its head. "We have observed humans for some time. Your expansion concerns us." The meeting grew tense after that. Jack watched as the ambassador tried to explain that humans sought peaceful exploration, not conquest. The Vesperians didn't seem convinced. "Your kind pushes into dangerous territories without caution," Zekrel said. "You take risks that no sensible species would consider. This behavior is disturbing." Jack listened carefully. The aliens weren't angry. They were scared. He'd seen this before on Earth when meeting new cultures. Fear often came before understanding. "Ambassador." Franklin was about to respond when the ship shook violently. Warning sirens blared. "We're being attacked," shouted Captain Foster over the intercom. "All personnel to emergency stations." The Vesperians in the room moved quickly, pulling out strange devices. Before Jack could draw his weapon, a blast of energy hit the wall behind him. In the confusion, he saw Ambassador Franklin fall to the ground. "This way!" Jack shouted to the other humans in the room, pulling them toward the exit. "We need to evacuate." They rushed through the corridors as the ship shook again. The emergency lights flashed red and smoke filled the air. Jack helped 3 diplomats into an escape pod, but before he could join them, a section of the ceiling collapsed, cutting him off. He turned to find another route and came face to face with 2 Vesperians. One raised a device, and Jack felt a sharp pain before everything went dark. When Jack woke up, he was in a small room with white walls. His uniform had been replaced with a simple gray outfit, and his weapons and communication devices were gone. A clear barrier separated him from a corridor beyond. Jack tested the barrier, solid and unbreakable. He was in a cell. Hours passed before anyone came. Jack used the time to exercise, keeping his body ready. He had been trained for capture situations, though no one had expected the captors to be aliens. Finally, the door at the end of the corridor opened. 3 Vesperians entered, led by one whose shell had intricate markings. This one wore more devices than the others, including something like glasses over its compound eyes. "The human is awake," it said, its words translated by a small device on its chest. "I am Chief Scientist Zekrel." Jack recognized the name. This was the same Vesperian who had been at the meeting. "What happened to my ship?" My crew? Many escaped. Some did not, Zekril answered without emotion. You are now at our research facility on Nexus 9. Research facility? Jack didn't like the sound of that. I'm a prisoner? You are a subject of study, Zekril corrected. Your species is an anomaly. You live on a dangerous planet, yet have survived. You wage war against yourselves, yet have advanced technology. You take risks that would be unthinkable to us. Jack stood up straight. We're adaptable, it's how we've survived. Skrull made a clicking sound that the translator didn't catch. Adaptable to danger is another way to say comfortable with fear. This is what we wish to understand. Where are the other humans? Jack asked. You are the only one we captured intact, Skrull replied. The others either escaped or resisted too strongly. Jack felt cold at those words. He was alone on an alien world, the only human in what sounded like a very long distance. Tomorrow we begin the tests, Zekril said. We need to understand your fear responses before we decide about your species. Decide what? Zekril's compound eyes seemed to study Jack closely. Whether your kind should be welcomed into the galactic community or contained for the safety of all. After the aliens left, Jack examined his cell more carefully. There had to be a way out. He needed to escape, to warn Earth about these Vesperians who feared humans enough to study them like lab animals. As he searched, he found a small vent near the floor, too small to crawl through, but maybe big enough to pass a message if he ever found an ally. He also noticed cameras watching his every move. Jack sat on the simple bed and took deep breaths. He had been in bad situations before. Growing up in the rough parts of Detroit, serving in war zones on Earth, surviving the chemical plant accident when he was 17, life had prepared him for hardship. Whatever tests they have planned, he whispered to himself, I've probably been through worse. As the lights in his cell dimmed for what he assumed was night, Jack made a promise to himself. He would survive this. He would escape. And somehow, he would make these aliens understand that humanity's relationship with fear wasn't a weakness. It was their greatest strength. Dr. Susan Graham checked her oxygen levels as she moved through the thick forest surrounding the Vesperian research facility. The trees on Nexus 9 were tall and strange, with blue-green leaves that blocked most of the sunlight from the planet's two small suns. Her stealth suit kept her hidden from the security drones that flew overhead every few minutes. 6 days had passed since the attack on the horizon's edge. Susan had been sent on this rescue mission because of her background in xenobiology and her special forces training. If anyone could understand these aliens and find the missing crew member, it was her. Base, this is Graham, she whispered into her comm unit. I'm approaching the facility perimeter. No detection so far. Copy that, Graham, came the quiet response from her small ship hidden 10 miles away. Remember, intel suggests only one survivor, Corporal Jack Miller. Susan nodded to herself. Her mission was clear. Find Miller and bring him home alive. Earth needed to know about these Vesperians and their intentions. Susan found a spot on a ridge that overlooked the facility. It was larger than expected, with several connected buildings surrounded by a force field that shimmered slightly in the alien sunlight. She pulled out her scanner and began searching for human life signs. Inside the facility, Jack was being prepared for what the Vesperians called a response test. 2 aliens dressed in what looked like protective gear led him from his cell to a large circular room. In the center was a chair with restraints. Please sit, one of the Vesperians instructed. Jack considered refusing, but he needed to learn more about this place if he was going to escape. He sat down, and the restraints automatically closed around his wrists and ankles. These tests help us understand your species, the other Vesperian explained as they checked monitors nearby. Chief Scientist Zekril will observe. Jack looked up and noticed a large window high above the chamber. Behind it, he could see several Vesperians, including Zekril, watching him intently. What kind of test is this? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The Vesperian technician adjusted something on a control panel. We will expose you to our fear stimulant compound. All species have fear responses. We need to catalog yours. Before Jack could ask more questions, The aliens left the room. A soft hissing sound began, and Jack saw a greenish mist starting to fill the chamber from vents in the floor. Above in the observation room, Z-Carl watched with great interest. "Begin recording all biological responses," the chief scientist instructed the team. "Heart rate, brain activity, hormone levels, everything." "Yes, chief scientist," replied a younger Vesperian named Trisk. "The fear gas concentration is at standard levels for a being of human size." Z-Carl's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Our understanding of humans will grow significantly today. Their apparent lack of fear is their most dangerous quality. Once we understand it, we can predict their behavior." The green gas swirled around Jack, getting thicker by the second. He tried to control his breathing, taking shallow breaths at first. The gas had an odd smell, like burning metal and chemicals. As he inhaled more of it, memories began to surface in his mind. He remembered the chemical plant explosion when he was 17, the burning smell and the panic as everyone ran. He remembered his tours of duty, the smell of burning buildings, and the fear that came with each mission. He remembered his childhood in Detroit, where the air near his home often carried industrial smells from the factories. But instead of causing panic, these memories reminded Jack of his own resilience. Each dangerous situation he had survived had made him stronger. Outside the facility, Susan's scanner finally picked up a human life sign. "Found you," she whispered, marking the location. She noticed increased activity in that section of the facility and enhanced her scanner's abilities to hack into their communication systems. "The subject's heart rate has increased slightly, but not as expected," came a translated voice through her comm unit. "Increase the concentration." Susan frowned. What were they doing to Miller? She needed to get inside, but the security was tight. She began looking for weaknesses in the perimeter. In the test chamber, the gas grew thicker. Jack could barely see the walls now. His heart was beating faster, but not from fear. The chemicals in the gas seemed to be giving him a rush of energy instead of panic. The smell grew stronger and more memories surfaced. "Subject still not displaying expected fear response," Trisk reported, sounding confused. "Vital signs indicate increased alertness but minimal stress hormones." Z-Carl moved closer to the observation window. "Impossible. The compound affects the fear center in all known species. Increased to maximum safe dose." The gas became so thick that Jack could hardly see his own hands on the chair's armrests. Yet instead of feeling afraid, he felt strangely at home. The smell, the sensations, they were all familiar to him after years of facing danger. He looked up toward the observation window and smiled. "Smells like home," he said clearly, knowing they could hear him. In the observation room, the Vesperians were clicking and moving rapidly in what Jack guessed was confusion or alarm. "This cannot be," Z-Carl exclaimed. "Check the equipment. The human should be experiencing terror right now." Trisk reviewed the readings. All systems functioning correctly. The human is simply not afraid. Susan had found her way to a ventilation maintenance shaft. The Vesperians were tall but slender, making their maintenance passages just barely large enough for a human to squeeze through. She followed the path that would lead her closest to Jack's location, her scanner guiding the way. As she crawled through the tight space, she could hear fragments of conversations from the rooms she passed. He'd never seen anything like it. Metabolizing the compound as if it were a stimulant. Could this be common to all humans or just this specimen? Susan reached a junction and paused. Her scanner showed she was directly above the observation room where the Vesperians were watching Jack. She placed a small device against the wall that would let her see and hear everything happening inside. In the test chamber, Jack was now leaning forward in his restraints, looking more alert than afraid. The fear gas that had reduced even the bravest Vesperian test subjects to trembling wrecks was having almost no effect on him. "I think we're done here," Jack called out. "Whatever you're trying to do isn't working." Z-Carl stared at the human with a mixture of fascination and concern. "Shut down the test," the chief scientist finally ordered. "I want to speak with the subject directly." As the gas began to clear from the chamber, Jack felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He had faced their fear weapon and overcome it without even trying. For the first time since his capture, he felt he might have an advantage. Susan watched through her device as the Vesperians prepared to enter the test chamber. She needed to make contact with Jack soon, but rushing in would only get them both captured or killed. She had to be patient and find the right moment. Phase 1 complete, she whispered into her comm unit. Target located and alive. Moving to Phase 2, making contact. Jack sat in a new room after the fear gas test. This one had a table and 2 chairs, more like an interview room than a test chamber. His restraints had been removed, but 2 Vesperian guards stood by the door, watching him with their compound eyes. The door slid open and Chief Scientist Carl entered. The alien's movement seemed more careful than before, as if approaching something dangerous. Your response was unexpected, Carl said, taking the seat across from Jack. No species has ever resisted the fear compound. Jack shrugged. Maybe you should visit Earth sometime, then you'd understand. Carl's head tilted slightly. Explain. Earth isn't a gentle place, Jack said. We have storms that can destroy entire cities, animals that can kill with a single bite. We've had wars, diseases, disasters, and that's just the natural stuff. Then we created pollution, nuclear weapons, and climate change. Humans who survive learn to live with fear. Zuckerl was silent for a moment, the alien's mandibles moving slowly as it processed this information. So all humans would respond as you did? Jack thought about it. Most who've been through enough would. Some might react stronger to your gas, but many would push through it. It's what we do. In the ventilation shaft above them, Susan listened to the conversation through a small device pressed against the metal. She had to admire Jack's calm approach with the aliens. He wasn't just surviving, he was teaching them about humanity. She checked her equipment. The small communication device was ready. She just needed the right moment to pass it to Jack without the Vesperians noticing. We will conduct more tests, Carl was saying. Different stimuli to measure your responses. Why not just talk to me instead? Jack suggested. You want to understand humans, I'm right here. Words can deceive, Carl replied. Biological responses cannot. Fair enough, Jack said. But remember, I'm just one human. We're all different. Carl stood up. You will be returned to your cell. Tomorrow we will continue our research. As the guards led Jack back to his cell, Susan followed through the maintenance shafts. She mapped the route carefully, noting security cameras and guard positions. When they reached Jack's cell, she found a small vent near the floor, her best chance to make contact. Jack lay on his bed staring at the ceiling. The fear gas test had left him tired but strangely energized. The Vesperians were afraid of humans, that much was clear. But they were studying him to understand, not just to attack. There might be room for real communication there. His thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound from the small vent near the floor of his cell. Jack didn't move immediately. He had noticed the cameras watching him and didn't want to alert the Vesperians to anything unusual. Slowly, as if stretching, he rolled off the bed and did a few push-ups on the floor. As he moved closer to the vent, he heard a whisper. Miller, don't react, keep exercising. Jack continued his push-ups, not changing his expression. Who's there? He whispered back when his face was near the floor. Dr. Susan Graham, Earth Special Forces, I'm here to extract you. Jack did a few more push-ups. How many others? Just me. Small stealth ship 10 miles out. Been tracking you since the attack on Horizon's Edge. Jack switched to sit-ups, keeping his movements natural. Security is tight. They're running tests on me. I know. I've been watching. I'm going to pass you something through the vent. Wait for my signal. Jack finished his exercises and went to wash his hands in the small sink in the corner. The water helped mask any sounds from the vent. A moment later, Susan whispered. Now. Jack knelt down as if tying his shoe and quickly grabbed the small device that had been pushed through the vent. It was no bigger than a coin. He slipped it into his pocket just as the cell door opened. Trisk, the younger Vesperian researcher, entered with a tray of food. Your nutritional requirements have been calculated based on scans of your physiology, the alien explained. Thanks, Jack said, moving away from the vent. Any chance I could get something to read? It gets boring in here. Trisk seemed surprised. by the request. I will consult with Chief Scientist Zakurel. After the Vesperian left, Jack waited until he was sure no one was watching before examining the device Susan had given him. It was a small communicator, Earth military issue designed to be undetectable by most security systems. He placed it carefully in his ear when the camera seemed to be pointed away. Immediately, he heard Susan's voice. Good. You've got it in. I can hear you through the device's microphone. Just subvocalize or whisper very quietly and I'll hear you. What's the plan? Jack whispered, pretending to rub his ear. I need a few more days to map the facility completely and find a safe exit route, Susan replied. But there's something else. I've been monitoring their communications. The Vesperians are preparing a report on humans based on their tests on you. That report will determine their official position on Earth, ally or threat. Jack processed this information. So my performance in these tests matters for more than just me. Exactly. The whole future of human-Vesperian relations could depend on how they interpret your responses. Jack nodded slightly to himself. Then I need to show them that humans aren't just fearless, we're also not a threat unless threatened. Be careful, Susan warned. Don't give away too much. We still need to get you out of there. Understood. When do we? The cell door opened again, cutting off Jack's whisper. 2 Vesperian guards entered. The chief scientist requests your presence for the next test, one of them said. Jack stood up calmly. What kind of test this time? Adaptation. Test. The chief scientist wishes to measure how quickly humans adjust to changing conditions. As Jack was led from his cell, he realized this might be an opportunity. If he could demonstrate human adaptability in a positive way, it might influence the Vesperians' report. Susan watched through the facility's security system, which she had hacked into using her specialized equipment. This adaptation test wasn't in any of the communications she had intercepted. She moved quickly through the ventilation system, following Jack's path. The guards brought Jack to a large chamber with a series of obstacles and challenges. It looked like some kind of training course. Zakarl waited at the entrance. Humans claim to be highly adaptable, the chief scientist said. This facility will test that claim with increasing difficulty levels. We wish to observe how you handle unexpected challenges. Jack looked at the course and felt a smile form. This was familiar territory. Military training had prepared him for exactly this kind of challenge. I'm ready when you are, he said. Susan found a viewing position and prepared to observe. This test might reveal just how much the Vesperians knew, or didn't know, about human capabilities. And that information could be crucial for their escape plan. As Jack stepped into the testing area, he felt strangely confident. Fear tests, adaptation tests. The Vesperians were unintentionally playing to human strengths. They were about to learn that what they feared most about humans was exactly what made humanity successful in the first place. The adaptation course started simply enough. Jack moved through basic obstacles, climbing walls, crossing narrow bridges, and navigating through a maze. The Vesperians watched from above, recording everything. This is too easy, Jack whispered to Susan through the tiny communication device. Basic military training covers harder stuff than this. They're starting slow, Susan replied quietly. I can see their control room from my position. They're going to increase difficulty based on your performance. As if on cue, the room temperature suddenly dropped. Jack could see his breath in front of him as frost began to form on the metal surfaces around him. Cold resistance test beginning, announced a Vesperian voice over speakers. Please continue through the course. Jack smiled slightly. He had done winter survival training in Alaska, where temperatures dropped far below freezing. This was uncomfortable but manageable. In the control room, Zakarl watched with interest as Jack continued through the obstacles without slowing down. The human shows minimal reaction to the temperature change, Trisk noted. Body scans show increased metabolism but no signs of distress. Interesting, Zakarl said. Their planet has extreme temperature variations. Perhaps they evolved special resistance, increased to maximum cold setting. The temperature plunged further. Ice formed quickly on surfaces, making the obstacles slippery and dangerous. Jack's fingers began to stiffen, but he kept moving, using techniques he'd learned for maintaining body heat, controlled breathing, continuous movement, and mental focus. He should be showing signs of hypothermia by now, a Vesperian technician said with confusion. Humans have special biological adaptations, Circle replied. Switch to heat test. Without warning, the temperature began to rise rapidly. The ice melted, and soon the room became as hot as a desert at midday. Sweat poured down Jack's face, but he continued through the course, pacing himself and conserving energy as he'd learned during deployments in hot zones. Impressive, Trisk said, watching the monitors. The human adapts to both temperature extremes with minimal preparation time. ZKRL made a clicking sound. Now for the surprise element test. Suddenly, parts of the floor began to move and shift beneath Jack's feet. Some sections rose while others fell away, revealing pits below. At the same time, objects began to fly across the room from hidden launchers in the walls. Jack reacted, instantly jumping to stable ground and dodging the flying objects. His military training kicked in. Assess threats quickly, prioritize hazards, move decisively. This is getting interesting, Jack whispered to Susan as he ducked under a flying sphere. They're testing combat reflexes now, Susan replied. Be careful. I don't think they want to kill you, but accidents happen. In her hiding spot above the control room, Susan was recording everything. This information about Vesperian technology and testing methods would be valuable to Earth, regardless of whether their mission ended in diplomatic success or the need for defense preparations. Jack reached a section where the floor had completely fallen away, leaving a large gap to cross. As he prepared to jump, he noticed a pattern to the moving floor sections. There was a rhythm he could use. The human is analyzing the pattern, Trisk observed. They show problem-solving abilities even under physical stress. Add the sound element, Z-Carl ordered. A piercing noise filled the chamber, loud enough to break concentration and cause pain. Jack winced but didn't stop. He'd experienced worse during combat. Explosions, gunfire, screaming. He timed his jump between floor movements and made it across the gap. Sound above pain threshold has minimal effect, a technician reported. Heart. Rate elevated but still within normal parameters. ZKRL seemed both impressed and concerned. These humans are more resilient than we anticipated. Final test element, isolation and darkness. The lights went out completely, plunging the room into total darkness. Jack stopped moving and stood still, letting his eyes adjust. But no adjustment came. The darkness was absolute. I can't see anything, Jack whispered. They've activated some kind of light-absorbing technology, Susan replied. I can barely see you on thermal imaging. They want to see how you handle sensory deprivation. Jack took a deep breath. Time to show them how humans deal with the unknown. Instead of panicking, Jack knelt down and felt the floor around him. He found the edge of the platform he was on and began to map his surroundings by touch. Step by step, he continued through the course, using his other senses to compensate for lack of vision. In the control room, the Vesperians watched through special viewing equipment. Remarkable, Trisk said. Instead of freezing in fear as our species would, the human adapts to blindness by enhancing other sensory inputs. The human brain shows increased activity in unusual patterns, another researcher noted. They are enjoying this challenge. ZKRL studied the readings carefully. This confirms my theory. What we perceive as recklessness in humans is actually a highly developed adaptation mechanism. They convert fear responses into problem-solving energy. As Jack neared the end of the course, the lights suddenly came back on. He blinked as his eyes adjusted, finding himself face-to-face with ZKRL, who had entered the testing area. Test complete, the chief scientist announced. Your performance was unexpected. Jack straightened up. Humans adapt. It's what we do best. But how do you overcome the fear response that should prevent such adaptation? Skrull asked. Our species evolved to avoid danger, not embrace it. We don't overcome fear, Jack explained. We use it. Fear sharpens our senses, increases our reaction speed, and focuses our minds. We evolved on a planet where running away wasn't always an option. Zekrel's compound eyes seemed to study Jack with new understanding. Fascinating. A completely different evolutionary path, yet successful. As Jack was escorted back to his cell, Susan followed through the maintenance passages. The Vesperian's reaction to Jack's performance gave her hope that diplomacy might still be possible. "You did well," she whispered once Jack was alone in his cell. "They seem impressed rather than frightened now." "Maybe," Jack replied quietly. "But impressed predators are still dangerous. What's our extraction timeline?" 2 more days, Susan said. "I need to disable the perimeter security systems without alerting them. But Jack, something else is happening. I've intercepted communications about a Vesperian council meeting tomorrow. They're going to decide their official position on humans based on the test results." Jack sat on his bed, thinking. So whatever they decide about me, they'll apply to all humans. Exactly. The stakes are bigger than just getting you out. This could determine whether Earth faces a new ally or a new enemy. Jack nodded slowly. Then we need to be smart about this. If they see humans as too dangerous, they might decide to attack Earth before we become a bigger threat. "What are you thinking?" Susan asked. "I'm thinking we might need to adjust our plan," Jack replied. "I need to show them that human adaptability can be a benefit to them, not just a threat." As night fell over the Vesperian facility, both Jack and Susan prepared for what would be the most important test yet. Not one designed by the Vesperians, but one that would determine the future relationship between two species from different worlds. Jack woke to the sound of alarms. Red lights flashed in his cell and a low pulsing sound echoed through the facility. He sat up quickly, immediately alert. "Susan, what's happening?" he whispered into the communication device. "Some kind of emergency," she replied, her voice tense. "I'm in the ventilation system near the main control room. The Vesperians are in a panic, something about their power core becoming unstable." Jack moved to the cell door, trying to see outside. 2 Vesperian guards rushed past, not even glancing at him. "This could be our chance to escape," Jack said quietly. "I was thinking the same thing," Susan agreed. "The security systems are running on backup power. I can override your cell door from here." A moment later, Jack heard a soft click as his cell door unlocked. He pushed it open carefully and looked both ways down the corridor. No guards in sight. Everyone seemed to be responding to the emergency. "Which way?" Jack asked. "Turn right, then take the 3rd left," Susan directed. "I'll meet you at junction point C7. But Jack, there's something else you should know. I've been monitoring their communications. The power core issue is serious. If it fails completely, this entire facility could explode." Jack paused. "How big an explosion are we talking?" "Based on their energy readings, it could take out everything within a 5-mile radius, and the fallout would contaminate a much larger area." Jack thought about the implications. If the facility exploded, the Vesperians would likely blame humans. Any chance for peaceful relations would be destroyed. Change of plans, Jack decided. We need to head toward the power core. "What? That's the opposite direction from escape," Susan objected. "I know. But if that thing blows, Earth gets a new enemy. If we help stop it, maybe we get an ally instead." Susan was silent for a moment. "You're risking both our lives on a diplomatic hunch." "That's the job," Jack replied. "Now how do I get to the power core?" With reluctance, Susan gave him directions. Jack moved quickly through the facility, staying out of sight when possible. The emergency had created chaos, with Vesperians rushing back and forth, carrying equipment and shouting orders. At junction C7, a small maintenance hatch opened above Jack's head. Susan dropped down beside him, dressed in a black stealth suit. She handed him a small weapon. "Just in case," she said. "But try not to use it. We don't want to confirm their fears about humans being violent." Jack nodded and tucked the weapon into his waistband. "Lead the way." They moved deeper into the facility, following the increasingly frantic activity toward the power core. Finally, they reached a large set of doors marked with warning symbols. 4 Vesperian guards stood outside, looking tense. "We can't get past them," Susan whispered. Jack studied the situation. "We're not going to fight. We're going to help. Before Susan could stop him, Jack stepped forward into view. The guards immediately raised their weapons. I want to help, Jack said clearly, raising his hands. I have experience with power systems. The guards clicked and chittered to each other in their language. Then one of them activated a communication device. A moment later, the doors opened, and Chief Scientist Zekril appeared, looking surprised to see Jack free. How did you escape containment? Zekril demanded. That doesn't matter right now, Jack replied. I know you have a power core emergency. I can help. Zekril's compound eyes studied Jack intently. Why would you assist those who imprisoned you? Because, if this place explodes, both our species lose, Jack said simply. Let me help. After a moment of consideration, Zekril nodded. Follow me. Jack turned to Susan, who had remained hidden. Stay close, he whispered. I might need your expertise too. Inside the power core chamber, Jack saw the problem immediately. The central column glowed with an intense blue light that pulsed erratically. Vesperian technicians worked frantically at control panels while warning indicators flashed across screens. The core is destabilizing, Zekril explained. Our cooling systems have failed, and the reaction is accelerating. We have attempted to initiate emergency shutdown, but the controls are not responding. Jack studied the system quickly. It was alien technology, but the principles seemed similar to Earth's advanced fusion systems. You need to vent the excess heat, he said. Is there a manual override for the cooling system? Yes, but it requires someone to enter the radiation chamber, Zekril replied. The levels are lethal. Lethal to Vesperians, Jack noted. But humans have different radiation tolerance. How long would I have? Zekril calculated quickly. Perhaps 3 minutes before receiving a severe dose. 5 minutes would be fatal. I need 2 minutes, Jack said confidently, though he felt far from certain. Susan stepped forward from the shadows. I'm coming too. 2 sets of hands will work faster. The Vesperian stared at her in surprise, but there was no time for questions. The manual controls are there. Zekril pointed to a small chamber separated from the main room by thick shielding. You must reset the primary cooling pumps and then activate the emergency heat exchangers. Jack and Susan moved quickly to the radiation chamber. As the door sealed behind them, they felt the heat immediately. The air shimmered with radiation. 1 minute and 50 seconds, Susan said, looking at her wrist device. After that, we need to be out. They worked quickly, resetting systems and rerouting power. Jack's military engineering training proved valuable as he understood the basic principles of the alien technology. 30 seconds left, Susan warned. As sweat poured down their faces, Jack's hands moved swiftly across the final controls. With a loud hum, the cooling systems reactivated. The blue glow of the core began to stabilize, pulsing more regularly. Let's go, Susan urged, pulling Jack toward the door. They stumbled out of the radiation chamber, both feeling lightheaded and nauseated from the exposure. Vesperian medical staff immediately moved to examine them. The core is stabilizing, a technician reported. Emergency systems are functioning again. Squirrel approached Jack and Susan as they received treatment for radiation exposure. You risked your lives to save those who held you captive. Why? Jack looked up weakly. Because that's what humans do. We don't just adapt to danger. We help others survive it too. You could have escaped during the chaos, Zekril observed. We could have, Susan agreed. But would that have helped either of our species in the long run? The next day, as Jack and Susan recovered in the medical facility, they received a visit from Zekril and several other Vesperians dressed in formal attire. The High Council has reviewed all data from our research and your actions during the emergency, Zekril announced. We have reached a decision regarding humanity. Jack sat up straighter in his bed, aware that this moment could determine the future of human-Vesperian relations. Humans are indeed dangerous, as Zekril stated, but not in the way we feared. Your adaptability, your ability to function under stress, and your willingness to help others at risk to yourselves, these are qualities that could benefit the galactic community. One of the other Vesperians stepped forward. We wish to establish formal diplomatic relations with Earth, not as potential threats but as potential allies. Jack and Susan exchanged glances of relief and surprise. "We will return you to your people," Carl continued, "and we hope you will carry our message of peaceful intentions." 3 days later, as their small ship approached the rendezvous point where an Earth vessel waited, Jack looked back at the Vesperian escort ships following at a respectful distance. "You know," he said to Susan, "they thought our fearlessness was our most dangerous quality. Turns out it was our most valuable one." Susan smiled. "Sometimes what others fear about us is exactly what they need most." As the Earth ship came into view, Jack thought about the fear gas that had started it all. The Vesperians had tried to use fear as a weapon, only to discover that humans had turned fear into a strength long ago. Some might call it home,